여러분 안녕하십니까?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
비즈 포럼
Thank you and welcome to the Think and Business Forum. My name is Kim Hana and I'll be hosting this forum. The second BIS session will deal with digitalization of the logistics industry and ways for cooperation between Korea and ASEAN. After the pandemic, digitalization is no longer a matter of choice, but a must. It is a key word throughout the logistics industry, including air, ocean, and surface transport. Now, with this theme, we will be talking about ways for Korea and ASEAN businesses to cooperate. We have two presenters and two discussants. The two speakers will be making their presentations, and that will be followed by a Q&A session. Today's session will be accompanied with Korean and English simultaneous interpretation, Korean on Channel 1 and English on Channel 2. I'd like to ask the speakers to conclude their presentation within 15 to 17 minutes. Now, the first speaker of the second session is Chairman Choi Hyung-lim of the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. He is also a professor at Donghua University in the Business Management Department. He'll be talking about Korean ASEAN cooperation in the age of smart logistics. Please welcome Professor Choi to the floor.
여러분들 반갑습니다.
It's a great pleasure to meet you all. As introduced, I am Choi Hyung-lim of Donghua University.
할 내용은 스마트
Today, I would like to talk about the cooperation that is possible between Korea and ASEAN in the smart logistics era.
우리 둘러싸고 있는 환경 변화에 대해서
I would like to first give you an overview of the changes in the logistics environment that we're witnessing, and then some background information on the Fourth Industrial Revolution and smart logistics. And last but not least, I would like to go into ways to strengthen cooperation between Korea and ASEAN in smart logistics.
물류 환경의 변화입니다.
First, the changes in the logistics environment.
네 가지 관점에서
I can divide up the changes into four categories.
우리가 너무나 잘 알다시피
First, as we are all very aware, we're living in the Fourth Industrial Revolution era.
기술과 관련된 그런
And with regard to technology, we are seeing new technologies emerging.
많이 변화된
And the social structure is also changing, so I would like to talk about that as well.
관점 그리고
And it's also impacting the economic structure. And since 2 years ago, due to the outbreak of COVID-19, we have been going through many challenges, and this also significantly impacts logistics. So let me talk about the individual categories. First is the technological development and the changes to logistics. As you are very well aware, on site,
로봇
in
기술
the logistics field, we are using robots, so there's a lot of automation that's going on.
변화되고 있는 그런 상황이고
And now it's common ground to see robotics being utilized. We have smart trucks and drones and various smart transport modes that are emerging.
뭐 사물 인터넷이나 인공지능 기술
IoT and AI is being used extensively for logistics as well.
실시간 그리고 지능화
This is why we can offer real-time, intelligent, and customized logistics services to the consumers.
무엇보다 또 빼놓을 수 없는 것이
And not only that, I will have to mention big data.
불확실한 미래를
By using big data, we can accurately forecast in a very uncertain future.
기술이 발달
And 3D printing is also a major factor that's impacting manufacturing.
결국은 우리가
And because of all of these factors, what's happening is the warehousing need of the past is decreasing.
사설에도 상당히
and it is also changing the global supply chain.
그다음에 이제 사회 구조적인
Let me now move on to some of the changes in social structure.
구조에 미치는 영향.
And the change in social structure does impact logistics.
정보의 생성
First, it has to do with information. So, who creates information? In the past, large organizations were the ones that generate information, but now we see individuals creating and generating information. And there is a diversification that's ongoing throughout the distribution channels.
정보의 생산이나 유통 그리고 소비
Information, so the generation of information and distribution of information is now shifting from large companies or organizations to individuals. And we also have social media and smartphone that is enabling individuals to create new business models.
경제적인 양극화가 심화돼가
However, on the flip side, we're seeing an exacerbation of the gap between the rich and poor.
이제 고민이 점차
And as you all know, we have a environmental crisis at hand, and this impacts the logistics agenda.
시키기 위한 쪽으로
Many people are also focusing on enhancing their quality of life.
구체적으로 보면은 물류 서비스 격차에 따라서
To give you some examples,
취약 지역이
you can
발생되기도
see that we do see vulnerabilities in the supply chain and the logistics chain, and also social conflicts due to areas where logistic services are not accessible.
수명이라든지 영양 공급
And with higher increased life expectancy and with a more focus on health and welfare, we're seeing demand for a cold chain increasing, which would include fresh logistics and pharmaceutical products. Let me now move on to the changes in the economic structure.
세계화와
We can see that globalization and localization is all taking place in parallel. We can call this globalization, and we're seeing an expansion of this.
글로벌 소싱을 주로 해왔다면
In the past, we focused on global sourcing. However, recently, due to COVID 19, global sourcing
우리가
exposed its limitations, and we experience the limits of the existing sourcing system.
영향도
And that is why we do see certain economies focusing on self sufficiency.
니어쇼링이
So, due to the changes in socioeconomic structure, we're seeing cases of nearshoring, backshoring, and exshoring. These are new sourcing and shoring strategies that are being introduced by countries.
서비스가 점차 고도화되면서
And with the sophistication of logistics services, we're seeing many jobs and businesses emerging from the digital platform.
달리 제조,
Unlike the past, manufacturing, distribution, information, and logistics in the past were siloed. However, no longer is that the case. We're seeing a convergence of these industries, and it's very difficult to distinguish one from the other. We also have the digital platforms such as 4PL and Supergrid Logistics. These are next generation logistics companies and their new business models.
개인화되고 다양화된 그런
So, as mentioned, consumers have now diverse needs, and there are more individuals that we have to cater to. And to satisfy to these diversified needs, we need the right infrastructure, the skills, and the human resources.
그런 형태
That is why collaboration is key. We need to share these resources and these assets in order to satisfy the modern consumer.
보면은 서로 협력하고 공유할 수 있는 그런
So, collaboration, cooperation, and sharing are the major themes of the new business models, and we're seeing more jobs being created in these spheres. And last but not least is COVID 19 and logistics. Due to COVID 19, it's very difficult to travel or to go around the neighborhood, for instance. And that's why we're seeing delivery services being frequently used.
우리 물품의 이동의 핵심인 물류 산업에서
The logistics industry is all about transporting and moving goods, and that's why COVID 19 had a great impact. A futurologist, Jason Schenker, said that in spite of the fact that severe losses and damages were caused by COVID-19, still there will be opportunities. And he mentioned that such opportunities will be based on ICT.
설명을 했었습니다. 결국은 뭐 잘 아시다시피
As you're very well aware, you
기술적인
can see that these logistics is being impacted by changes in technology, socioeconomic factors, and COVID-19. And when we bring this all together, we can say that the future lies in ICT for logistics. This is something that we need to understand, and it's quite evident that this is the way forward.
기술에 대해서 간략하게 좀
Let me now go into some fourth industrial revolution technologies.
저는 뭐 그렇게 보고 있습니다. 이 4차 산업혁명 기술이 특별한 것이
I believe that Industry 4.0 technologies, they are not anything new. If you go back into the past, it all boils down to one single thing.
의사결정을 할 수 있다.
It's all about bettering our decision-making skills. So all of the technologies were focused on enabling us to make the right decision and a better decision. And to make the right decision, what do we need? We need data and we need information.
데이터와 정보를 어떻게
So then,
도움이 되는 데이터와 정보를 어떻게
how can we collect and acquire useful data and information? And how can we do that in an efficient manner?
그 유능함과 무능함
That basically determines the wise and unwise.
관련되는 기술들도
All
결국
of the technologies that drove computational power was all about efficiently acquiring and collecting data, information, and managing that data information, and to eventually create useful knowledge from it. So all of the technologies were to support that, and the fourth industrial revolution technologies are no exception.
IoT
One of the key technologies of Industry 4.0, and one is IoT, Internet of Things. This is also about acquiring useful and sound data. Input, process, output are the key phases for the computer. So it's this technology is for the input part of the computer.
기술이 사물 인터넷이고
So IoT enables us to collect information, not only any information, but useful information. And we have to process this information in an effective and efficient manner to transform this into knowledge. And this we call big data analysis. In the process of big data analysis, deep learning and other skills are being used. And deep learning is a part of AI.
이제 이런 빅데이터 기술 외에
In addition to big data technology and deep learning,
우리가
what's important is to store this data before we process. And in order to store vast amounts of data, we need the right facilities to do that. And one way to help us enhance the efficiency in the process of storing data is cloud computing.
모든 컴퓨터 장비를 다 보유하고 있을 필요가 없다.
Individuals do not necessarily have to own each and every piece of equipment.
돈을 내고
We
사용
can just pay the space that we need, and that's cloud computing.
클라우드 컴퓨팅은
Cloud computing is probably a part of the shared economy business model.
더 저렴하고
We
효율
can
저장할 수 있도록 해주는
store data in an efficient and a low-cost fashion by using cloud computing, and also query the information whenever we need to check or confirm that information. So once again, to collect the data, we use IoT. We analyze that information with big analytics to create useful knowledge. And what we do is store that knowledge as well as the data via cloud computing. So these are some of the key components to fourth industrial revolution. And we cannot disregard AI, of course.
사람과 같은
AI originally was to create a robot that is very close to human beings.
그런 기술 수준은 못 됐거든요.
The technology hasn't reached that level as of yet, because if you want the robot to function like a human being, the five senses, you need to find a way to make that a reality. So the sensory system and the learning capabilities of the brain, uh, and to have that embedded in the robot is something that we need, and also cognitive skills, the skills to understand what the other is saying, and also being able to talk and respond. All of these technologies are necessary, and when we have this all well interconnected, then can we create a humanoid. However, the knowledge of the human being is immense, and AI cannot encompass all that as of yet with the existing technology.
강한 strong AI라고 이야기.
So there are two types of AI, and the ideal version is the strong AI. So we haven't reached that level as of yet.
해야 될 업무를 보다
AI is currently being used to enhance the efficiency of our work and to support us in decision making. So that's the level of AI right now, and we call such AI weak AI.
이것은 특정 문제에 있어서의
As mentioned, such AI is designed to support
weak
problem solving when just specific types of problems. So this is weak AI. AlphaGo is one good example of how weak AI technology was used.
생성의 문제 해결에 좀 도움이 주는 쪽으로 잘
So as mentioned, if we make good use of AI to solve certain problems, I think that for the time being is the desirable way forward. So the fourth industrial revolution technologies and AI is utilized to help us solve the pending issues of the times.
다음에 이제 제가 이제 혁명과 관련된 기술에 대해서
With regard to fourth industrial revolution, I've mentioned a couple of technologies, but this is not the important part here.
자기 개인이
It's important to understand how we can solve our problems with the advantages of fourth industrial revolution.
할까라고
What would be the desirable way forward?
제가 4차 산업혁명에 그
In order to better your understanding, I decided to put together this diagram.
기본 사상은 크게 세 가지.
I believe that there are three key concepts to the fourth industrial revolution. One is openness, second, cooperation, and third, sharing.
중요한 4차 산업
I believe that these three concepts are critical to the fourth industrial revolution,
도와주는 기술이 4차
and any technologies that would help with the three pillars can be called fourth industrial revolution technology. So we need to first identify the problem that we want to solve, and we have to look into and surface technologies that will help us solve those problems. So let me now first go into the first concept or the first pillar of openness.
시대를 살고 있는 우리들이 보면은
For those that live in the modern era, there are so many challenges, and the challenges are not just simple challenges, they are significant, complex challenges.
한 조직 내에서
Therefore, a single organization or with the resources of a single organization will not be enough to solve these problems.
해결하려고 하면은
In order to solve these problems,
지금 현 상황을
what we need to do is expose my current situation, seek support from external sources for their resources, and have the problem solved. So that is the basic concept of openness.
먼저 개방하고 내
So it's about first opening up my data and
문제를 풀어줄 수 있는 사람은
informing others of my circumstance and my situation. And once we do that, we can find many other resources that can help us out. There are times when it's quite difficult to solve just from within. So that's why we need openness. We need to open up, share information, and try to find those and find supporters that can help us solve our problem. And we're seeing many examples of such.
우리 자원만 가지고 문제를 해결해
As I've mentioned, it's not just about utilizing our internal resources. That's quite foolish. We need to
이 중요하고
identify what resources exist on the outside, and to do that, we have to be open. Next is cooperation.
힘으로 가는 것이 아니고 서로
Cooperation means different disciplines, domains, industries come together.
이렇게
And not only that, it's about a cooperation between online and offline. We need to put together such a cooperative model, and only then can we solve the problems, and only then can we respond to the consumers' needs and demands.
협력과 융합을
So collaboration, cooperation of different heterogeneous technologies
CJ와 네이버
could be something that we need to focus on. Recently, there was an alliance forged between CJ and Naver. So it was a cooperation between a number one logistics company and a video contents company. It was about complementing the insufficiencies that existed in their businesses. And this enabled them to maximize on their competitive strengths.
그다음에 이제 공유입니다.
Now, let us move on to the third pillar, which is sharing.
더 이상 이제 소유의 종말이라고 하는
Some do say that we're seeing the demise of ownership. There was one futurologist actually that wrote a book on this, that it's no longer about ownership. It's about just using the amounts that are necessary, and that this is the efficient way to lead a life.
숙박업체 공유
Car sharing and also shared housing, accommodation are some business examples that we see, but it's also about sharing data.
보다 제대로 된
As I've mentioned, if we share data, we can find a better way to solve the issues at hand.
관점에서의
So sharing
필요하다.
is necessary if we want to pursue a successful digital transformation. And especially in the era of data, it's important to find ways to share that data in an effective fashion. So the three pillars, openness, cooperation, and sharing, will help us solve the challenges and also find an efficient solution to the problems.
필요한 기술은 얼마든지 우리가 공급을 받.
And as long as we understand the three concepts, we can surface and unearth the technologies that would be required to support this endeavor. Let me now move on to smart logistics.
로지스틱스 4.0
Smart logistics
맥락으로 우리가
is in the same vein as Logistics 4.0.
로지스틱스 1.0 시대는
Logistics 1.0 was about the mechanization of transport. And Logistics 2.0 is about mechanization of load and unload. Containers were invented that has enabled us to load and unload in an effective manner. Logistics 3.0 has to do with software. It was all about innovation in software.
를 통해서
So through these logistics softwares, we were able to bring the factors together into a system. And Industries 4.0,
기술들을 기반으로
as mentioned, makes use of Industry 4.0 technologies to evolve the existing logistics system. So smart logistics and logistics 4.0 is basically the same thing. Smart logistics
또는 주체들이 서로
involves all factors and all stakeholders connected. So we call this super connected or hyper connected.
고지능성
And the fact that we can analyze data means that we're utilizing super or hyper intelligence. This enables us to maximize the utility of available resources, time, and space.
가시성을 향상.
And eventually, it helps improve visibility and strengthen service automation and intelligence to increase productivity in logistics.
키워드는 세
So the key word of smart logistics would be the following. First is real-time visibility, second, automation, and third, optimization.
그다음에 이제 스마트 물류의 지금 현재
Moving on,
대해서 말씀을 조금
let
드리게
me talk about some of the issues of smart logistics.
돼 있죠.
Right now, we're impacted significantly by externalities.
주체의 최적화로만 해서
So if we just optimize by the individual player, doesn't mean that we're optimized as a system.
주체들도 최적화
The individual players need to optimize themselves. However, we need another layer where we need optimized connectivity or connection amongst all of these players.
그리고 연계
However, that's not the case. So we don't have a fully connected system. We don't have a seamless data delivery system, leading to delays.
좀 개선시켜야 될 필요가 있다.
And that's why we need to find a way to solve this based on the key concepts of the fourth industrial revolution. We need to unearth adequate technologies to help us make the right decision and also to assist us in enhancing the efficiency in using our resources.
아세안 그 물류기업 협력 방안에
Let me now move on to
아시안의
Korea ASEAN cooperation in the smart logistics era. Google, Temas, and Bain & Company released a report. And according to this report, it indicates that the ASEAN digital economy is to exceed $300 billion by 2025. This means that the market is growing bigger.
여기에 따라서 이제 아시안 각 국가들이
Therefore,
그 물류의 현대화와 디지털화를
the countries of ASEAN is targeting modernization and digitization of the logistics system, and many policies are being announced with 2025 as a target year.
아시안 디지털 장관
Especially at the ASEAN Digital Ministers meeting this year,
아시안
a 2021 to 2025 roadmap was announced.
2025를 채택을
This is called the ADM 2025 or the ASEAN Digital Master Plan 2025.
국가들이 선도적인 그런 디지털
Countries are actively engaging in creating a digital community as well as an economic bloc to achieve the goals of modernization and digitalization. Asian markets are increasing in size, as mentioned, and the countries are taking a strategic approach and are devising policies
현재 아시안의 물류 환경을 살펴보면은
to improve their logistics system. If we look at Singapore,
LPI라는 지수가 있습니다. 그 LPI 지수가 2018년도에 7위.
in 2018, they were 7th in the LPI or the Logistics Performance Index. Thailand was 32nd and Vietnam was 39th. So all in all, except Singapore, the LPI or the logistics environment is not as satisfactory in the ASEAN countries. However, if we cooperate, I think we can
만들어내야 될 것 같습니다.
bring about a future that can be mutually beneficial, and we will need the policies to support this effort.
아시안 진출
In Korea,
상당히 저조한
there aren't that many companies that actually entered into the ASEAN market. Manufacturers and traders account for 62% of Korean companies in ASEAN, and only 2% are logistics companies.
업체 정도인
Out of the 331 companies, that's basically it. And out of the 331 companies that run a logistics or warehousing facility abroad is only 30.
해외 물류 거점 시설을 활용하고 있는 물류 기업이 0.2%.
And this is only 0.2% of the total.
우리가 이제 앞으로 이런 부분들을 좀
Therefore, in the future, we need to find a way to facilitate this part of the pie.
지금 현재 보면은 취약한 물류 인프라 구축
Right now, we do need to focus on the logistics infrastructure because it's now still quite insufficient. So in the future, the logistics providers need to work on infrastructure projects. So this could be a good entry point for Korea's logistics companies.
제조기업이 상당히 활발하게 이제
Another point I would like to make is that since we have many Korean manufacturers in the region and in the market, we may find a sound partnership between these manufacturers and logistics companies.
우리나라
And the individual logistics companies, as mentioned, are quite small in size, so maybe we can engage in some sort of strategic partnership when entering into a new market, because this will help the local logistics companies lower their risk in the ASEAN market, especially when it's their very first attempt into the market.
우리가 그 물류 기업의 협력 방안으로서 지리적 물류
Another way to cooperate is to utilize geographical logistics hubs by country.
그래서 우리가
This could be a key differentiation point. When the logistics companies enter into a market, you need to first understand the scope that you want to cover and decide which cargo you want to cover.
화물을 선정을 해서
And there are specialized cargo that you can handle, so you need to first make a decision on that.
국가 간의 국경 연결을 위한 물류 거점과
And we need logistics hubs that connects countries and those that connect the various transport modes and the consumers.
마지막으로 요즘 이제
And to also a logistics base that connects consumers and ports to facilitate entry into neighboring regions. And a joint logistics center can also help us reduce logistics costs and help companies make inroads into overseas markets. I know that Busan Port Authority is actively engaging in efforts with Asia and Europe and countries around the world to establish joint logistics centers. I hope that such efforts will be all the more facilitated. Not only Busan Port Authority, but I also hope the logistics companies show interest in this effort to create joint logistics centers.
조금 시간이
I think I went overboard on my time, but thank you very much for your attention.
고맙습니다.
Thank you very much, Professor Choi. He was the chairman of the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Openness, cooperation, and shared services and facilities were some of the backbones of our wisdom required in this new era. And I think it's the same with Logistics 4.0. What sort of attitude should we have? How should we prepare for that? And how should Korean and ASEAN companies cooperate? We will meet him again while the discussion roundtable goes on shortly. Now we will connect with Malaysia. The next speaker is the director of FMFF, Mr. Yuan Tiong.
Digitalization of
He'll be talking about digitalization of services. How can we assist each other in the acceleration?
발표를 해 주실 거고요. 지금 연결
I think we are connected. Shall we say hello?
Thank you for your presence.
Hello, good day to all the audience and participants. Thank you very much to Korean Institute and also KIFA for inviting me to attend this webinar. And also my appreciation to my president, Mr. Alvin, for nominating me to present in this webinar. Allow me to share my screen. Yeah?
Yes. 자, 그러면 이제 자료를 공유해 주실 거고요. 발표
He will be sharing his slides with us, and we will now begin his presentation.
Please start your presentation.
Okay, I'm going to talk about digitalization of services. How can we assist each other in the accelerations? My name is Evan Tiong. I'm actually the program director under the Federation of Malaysian Freight Forwarders. So today I'm very honored to be presenting here to all the audience of the Korean and also ASEAN representative. So will be my presentation's outline. First of all, I'm going to talk about the ASEAN and the Republic of Korea trade statistics. How are we doing so far? Next, I'm going to talk about some of the key concepts that how are we going to go digital. So I'm going to share some of my understanding about digitalizations, and this key concept will help us to understand better how can actually we move our businesses to go to digital, and eventually this will lead to the creation of the digital economy. Next, I want to talk about a little bit about the digital readiness and also some of the challenges that might face by all the companies embarking on this journey. Also, I'm going to share some of the initiative that has been done in my country myself from Malaysia. So this initiative is a sharing among all the community over here so that you all can also see what has been done and some of the things that can also be adopted as well. And also I'm going to discuss on one of the case discussions that some of the digitalization effort has been done by one of the company that has embarked on this trade facilitation process on some of the logistics companies. So this can be some of the discussion that we can move on later on to the panel discussion as well. And of course, having said all of that, I believe it's very crucial also as we move to the new era, there's always a need for us to discuss on the aspect of building the digital talents and some of the initiative that has been done on Malaysia's side as well. All right, so without further delay, I will move on to my presentations now. Okay, so as you can see from the trade statistics, ASEAN and Korea, I think we have been having these two main trade agreement as we seen over here, the ASEAN-Korean Free Trade AFTA and also ASEAN-Korea Trade in Goods Agreement, ATIGA. So all of these trade agreement assist us to trade more freely among our region, not only for the ASEAN and also between Korean and also the ASEAN region as well. And as we can see from 2009 to 2020, the numbers has been growing from the trade value of 75 billion. Now it's about, in 2020, it's about 144 billion. So there has been an increase of about 92% over the 10 years. Of course, as we enter into these current situations, I believe the pandemic has hit us and it definitely has slowed down a little bit on our initial target of increasing the trade between all these regions. But I believe moving forward, this is very relevant as we have this discussion today on digitalizations. By going digital, this will assist us to move on and help us to weather through this digital pandemic that we are facing right now. Between the trade of Korea and Malaysia, you can see that it is the numbers over here. I think this representing about almost 10 to 12% of the ASEAN-Korean trade value. So the value is roughly around 20 billion between Korea and also Malaysia. And from the products of the trade, you also can see the trend of the integrated circuits. So this basically marks the relevance of digitalizations as we move on further into the digital economy. So this would definitely be part of the things and part of the products that we are going to see an increase in terms of the trade. Okay, so in terms of the ASEAN Master Plan 2025, you can see here that I pull out this ASEAN Digital Master Plan. So this outlines basically the prospect of how we're going to move on to the digital economy. So throughout this collaboration of ASEAN, we have come up with this master plan on how basically we can enable digital inclusions, grow and strengthen our digital services, and most importantly, how can we increase productivity and economic growth? This is very important as we move on to the new era and how we're going to get connected with all of the community. As shown earlier by the earlier speaker, Professor. So we have a large community of around, the value of around 600 million expected value in terms of the trade. So this is by using the digital technology, definitely this will help us to increase the volume of the trade as well. And therefore, there's a lot of focus moving into all this blueprint on how basically we can assist each other and to weather this COVID-19 effect. Okay, I'm going to talk about the key concepts of going digital. So a lot of time actually digitalize, and digital transformation has been used interchangeably among a lot of people out there in the community. So today I'm going to clarify some of these key concepts and why it is important as we move on to the digital economy. So digitize actually is the first level among all these three concepts, because digitize actually referring to the data and informations. As we move on along, we have been doing a lot of trades. All the things has been done through the use of paper. But I believe nowadays more and more things start to go paperless. And therefore, by digitizing, this would be the first step for us to start and initiate the digital economy. Without digitized informations, we can't move on to the next level of the digitalization effort. So what is involved in these digitized dimensions? First of all, it will involve data and informations. And why is it important? Because this, by having it in digital format, it will help us in terms of the accessibility and also the security of the informations. So what are the applications of digitized by going digitized? Cloud sharing, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and even internet. So these are some of the forms. As long as we are doing some of these activities, this basically referring to how we can digitize some of the informations. Next, we'll move on to digitalize. Digitalize means that we are actually changing some of the processes and also operations by doing all these activities in the digital kind of environment. And this is basically can assist us improving our efficiencies, productivity, and even creating new channels. All right. Some of the example of the applications by going digitalized is actually ERP, POS, BI, CRM, and IoT. Even the e-payment, e-invoicing, automations, and even digital marketing. These are some of the applications that we have seen. And all of this can only happen if we start to move all our informations and digitize our informations. And this definitely will help us to improve our efficiencies. Having said all that, the next thing would be digital transformations. Of course, this will only happen if we already successfully digitize and digitalize some of our processes and operations. And by doing that, we also have to change our thinking. And digital transformation basically reflecting the change of the thinking and also creations of a business opportunities and business model. So why do we need to have these digital transformations? Because this will assist us to build capacity, scale up, even creating new markets and new products. As I was to talk in this forum, so we have community from every part of the region. And by having the thinking of digital transformation among all the businesses, especially in the logistics, this can help us to build capacity, scale up, and even create new market opportunities among different regions. And some of the applications including e-commerce, mobile apps, personalized contents and services, R&D, innovations, data, and even AI as well. So as I were to go through all the key concepts, those are the important things that it has to happen and is already happening in our current age. And based on the report that has been done by the World Bank, these has been identified as the foundations of digital economy. Of course, we always been talking about digital economy, and as shown in the earlier presentations by the speaker number 1 as well, the projected value in 2025 would be around 300 billion in this region for the digital economy. On the other hand, on the World Economic Forum, it was projected that in the next 10 years, this value could even reach up to $1 trillion. And this will only happen with a good supportive macroeconomics and business climates, and also the growing number of digital entrepreneurs. So among all of the foundation that has been identified, these will be 5 areas that I would like to highlight over here. As we grow on in this new age, I believe the universal access to affordable and high-speed broadband becoming essential as we to grow this digital economy. So this will only happen if we have the supportive macroeconomy, as I shared earlier. And the next thing would definitely be the skill. Since we're going to create this new digital economy, we also need the talent and people who can actually venture into all this kind of a new business transformation as well. Therefore, we have to invest in terms of developing new skills with people with digital ability, and this definitely will help us to propel to move the digital economy forward. And of course, the payment system as well. Currently, most of the transaction, I believe, is still done using paper currency. So moving forward, I think digital payment, and therefore there's a lot of a booming of a fintech has been growing. And this is part of all the symptoms and evidence that we are moving into this digital economy. And of course, all of this would not happen without the assistance of logistics as well. So logistics, I think we are also moving to logistics 4.0 as we move into this industry revolution 4.0. This will help us to move the physical aspect of the materials as we transact on the digital platform. The digital economy can assist us in terms of the transactions and help us to interact with each other in a more accessible and without any barrier. But we need the logistic to really bring the product physically to be arriving at the destination of our interaction and also transactions. And of course, last but not least, one of the final foundations aspect of it would be the digital policy, regulations, and even digital ID. As we build this digital economy, more and more people will be moving onto this online platform. But the policy and regulation will ensure that the necessary people can be identified through the platform, because by going digital, the way that we perceive how the interaction will be done is going to be different. And even how are you going to know who are we interacting with in the online spaces is going to be challenging. So all these policies, regulations, and even how are we going to create a digital ID will be very important for us to uncover before we can actually grow this digital economy. So let us look on to the next aspect of it. So how ready are we to move on to this digital economy era? So this report has been extracted from IDC, International Data Corporations, and it has been done in this Asia Pacific region. There's a representative from Malaysia businesses, the numbering 100 companies. And through this spider chart that you have been able to see on the diagram over here, compared to the Asia Pacific region and also Malaysia, Malaysia is still lagging behind in terms of the data and also investment. Over here, we can see there are 6 dimensions in terms of the digital readiness, namely strategy, digital investment, culture, capabilities, infrastructure, and also data. The Asia Pacific has been indicated by the blue line, whereas for Malaysia, indicated by the red line. So we can see that Malaysia is still lagging behind in the Asia Pacific, and definitely this is something that we need to look into for us to grow and move this digital economy to become a reality. For us to have this digital economy happening, we have to start digitizing the data and also invest more in terms of the infrastructures as well. Also in the report, I wanted to highlight on some of the challenges of the digitalizations. So these are the top 3 factors that's been identified by the IDCs to be the challenges in digitalizations, namely the lack of the leadership and commitment to invest in AI, lack of skills, resources, and continuous learning programs, and also lack of advanced analytics and adequate infrastructure and tools to develop actionable insights. This is similar to the earlier report that I have shown in terms of the data and also investment in the area of digital readiness. But I would like to specifically highlight on the leadership and the commitment to invest in the AI, because without leadership, most of the things would never happen. So for the digital economy to become reality, there has to be the strong commitment and also endorsement for this thing to move into digital before actually we can grow this digital economy. So this pie also summarizes all the 5 dimensions of the digital challenges in a more graphical manner. As we to move into this digital era, we have to really look into some of these areas and how we can make things more efficient on the digital platform. So we have to actually shift our mindset from the outdated KPIs and move on to the new KPIs. The new KPIs basically referring to the digital transformations that have been mentioned earlier. As we move on to the digital platform, the way that we're going to conduct our transaction and also activities will be different. Therefore, the KPI also has to reflect with the changes of the business operation needs as well. And of course, the next one will be the siloed digital transformation initiatives. So the organization structure as we know currently, it may have to be having some changes as we to move on to these digital transformations. The way that we imagine how the processes being done through digitalizations, the processes definitely going to be changing. And therefore, we cannot afford to work in silos. All of things has to be happening in a common platform. A lot of our businesses right now, what they have done is that they have digitalized a lot of their activities, but all of it has been done in silos and they couldn't interact with one another. And this definitely would hinder the ability for us to see the real potential of the digital transformations. For us to be able to have the vision of the digital transformations, each aspect of the businesses have to be able to interact not only within the country, but also inter-country activities and transactions as well. Therefore, close collaborations and exchange of information in the building up of the infrastructure is definitely essential for this collaboration to happen. And of course, in terms of the challenges, we also need to consider about the tactical plans. There has to be a digital roadmap. Digital roadmap would be something like what I have shared earlier, as we can see with the ASEAN blueprint and also master plan on the digital master plan 2025. This assists us to guide where we are going as we would grow this digital economy. And of course, in terms of expertise, we need to start having people with the digital abilities and capabilities to make this reality. Therefore, we actually have to invest in terms of educational and also upskilling a lot of existing workforces so that they're able to perform whatever they are good at currently into this digital space. And of course, innovations, we also need a lot of a digital platform to be able to connect to one and another. Like I mentioned earlier on the Silo Digital Transformation Initiative, we have to have a common platform and common connections that allow us to exchange the information and also transactions to happen within the inter-platform. So those are all the things that has been identified to be the challenges in this digitalization effort. So moving closer to the framework in terms of the logistic businesses and all, I believe earlier on the speaker has also touched on the logistics 4.0. I'm going to move on to touch on the supply chain 4.0. This supply chain has been more than relevant to all the logistic players and for trades to happen. And for us to move into this industry 4.0, we have to start imagining how things could be done in a different manner and how we can harvest the ability of all the technological capabilities so that we can actually improve our activities and also increase the digital economy as well. So in this supply chain compass report by the McKinsey, we have identified 6 main value drivers in the area of the supply chain, namely in terms of the supply chain strategy, planning, physical flow, performance management, order management, and also collaborations. We have seen a lot of investment has been done in all these 6 aspects of the supply chain. And for instance, some of the things has already been mentioned in terms of the automations, human-machine interface, smart logistics, 3D printing, and all the others as well. We have to start shifting our mindset from the earlier industrial revolutions. I believe in the 3.0 revolutions, we have seen the booming era of the .com era. Now we are at the 4.0. We are shifting everything into automations and also AI as well. There's an acronym that has been used in this industry 4.0. What I like to use is actually the ABCD of this industrial revolution 4.0. So these are 4 key areas that we need to look into. A basically referring to AI. So this is definitely something to look for if let's say the logistics company were to look into how they can cope with this supply chain. B basically referring to the blockchain. Blockchain technology definitely will be important because this will allow us to make transaction happen and in more secure manner as well. And of course, in terms of C, we are referring to the cloud computing. Cloud computing, as we all know, it can assist us to scale out faster and also help us to save costs as well as we to move a lot of our businesses activities to the online channel. We do not need to store all this information on the physical premises anymore. And by going to the cloud, everything can be done more seamlessly and become available all the time as compared to premises on-site kind of a hosting. And of course, in terms of the D, we are referring to the data analytics. With all the big data and amount of data being generated in these transactions, definitely we are able to have a lot of data available. But all this data wouldn't be meaningful without the data analytics aspect. And the data analytics aspect is the part that actually helping us to create insights, probably some insights that we have never think before. And this basically will assist us to understand better how actually we can create more value to our client and also business opportunity that could arise from all this activity and transactions that is happening. So having said all that, the supply 4.0 with all the advances of the technology through this ABCD, I believe we are able to reduce the operating costs, and we can also increase reduce the number of inventories that we have to keep due to the ability for us to predict some of the trend and also activities that is happening. And of course, 75% lower loss of sales as well. So without this data and predictions, informations, there's a lot of lost opportunity that is happening currently in the current supply chain arrangement. So by having all of this going digital, we are able to see clearer some of the trends that's happening and eventually capitalize on a lot more opportunities that's happening. So how can we be guided on to move on to this digital era? I wanted to share the next slide on the transformation framework on what are the things that we can look into. So as the businesses start to move into these digital transformation activities, this will be the 6 key dimensions that you can look into. The source has been extracted from this Butman and Peter 2019. They have analyzed all the 18 numbers of a framework and models on how basically a businesses can embark on this digital transformations journey. So these are the 6 dimensions: strategy, organizations, culture, technology, and also customer. They need to look into all these areas. In terms of strategy, they need to start to formulate a digital strategy. As I mentioned earlier, when we move on to the digital economy, we have to start imagining how we're going to do the things in the digital kind of environment. And therefore, you need a new strategy, which is going to cope with the new business operations as well. And this basically involving documentation and communication strategy, and also allocating sufficient resources as well for these things to happen. In terms of the organizations, we need to reimagine how the structure of organizations and also how we can have a cross-functional collaboration as well between one another. By going digital, most of us will be more accessible to one another and more connected as well. And corporate venturing definitely will become more possible to happen as well. And this will create innovations, labs, and also digital factories as well. On the other hand, we also need to consider culture. In terms of the digital transformation culture, we have to start having the kind of a freedom to experiment and fail forward kind of a cultures. Because as we move to these digital transformation activities, it will be something very new to a lot of organizations. So therefore, you have to have that kind of mindset to continue to learn and experiment in order for us to find a new business channel and also model as well. And of course, it will require a strong commitment from the management and also strong digital leaders. A lot of organizations will fall in this kind of environment because of the lack of leadership support. Without a leadership support, this thing could never happen because people will always fall back to the way of doing things manually and become more secure with the current existing model of how businesses are being transacted. However, as we are all aware, by going digital, this basically can help us to scale and make activities more efficient. Therefore, it is inevitable for us to move into these directions. But this will only happen in the organization if there is a strong digital leaders embarking on this journey. In terms of the technology, I'll just refer back to the ABCD that I mentioned earlier. Those are the areas that all the logistic company can look into for them to assist to digitize a lot of their operations and to make things differently from what currently they have been doing. In terms of the client, now the client base would be both online and also offline. Therefore, they have to actually have a hybrid kind of model as we have these transformations. We have to also give the customer the similar kind of experience as they would have in the offline kind of mode. This assists us to have a continuous branding and also the journey and experience on the organizations. And of course, in terms of the workforce capabilities, educations and also upskilling is very important and crucial for the digital transformation to work. Therefore, the existing workforce need to upskill and also think of the things, doing things differently before we can grow the digital economy. Now I'm going to share a little bit on some of the initiative that has been done in Malaysia by this Malaysian Digital Economy Corporation, or MDEC in short. They have looked into these 7 key areas to digitalize, and this would be the start-off point for a lot of organizations who are thinking to digitalize their business operations. These 7 areas include digital marketing and sales, electronic point of sales, HR, payroll, procurement, ERP, remote working, and e-commerce. A lot of these 7 areas, the technology is already available for most of the companies to move on as a stepping stone before actually they move to the digital transformations. If you can remember the 3 key concepts that I shared earlier. Firstly, for all the organizations, what they need to do is digitize their informations. Secondly, they need to digitalize a lot of their current operations. Once that is done, we can move on to the next level, which would be the digital transformations. Now I'm going to share one of the case discussions of the things that has been done in Malaysia as an example. This is a roadmap for the electronic NPCO, or non-preferential certificate of origin, which is actually assisting the trade to happen between different countries. So in this example, how the things can happen is basically we need to identify the stakeholders involved in the interactions. So over here we can see the exporters, ENP. The system will allow all these stakeholders to come onto the platform. But all the activities could not happen if, let's say, there is no agreement between the exporting and also importing countries in terms of the digitalized informations. And this will only happen if we have the collaboration happening between the exporting country and also importing countries. And of course, this will also involve the government agencies to be on the platform as well. So I'm just going to run through very briefly. Like I mentioned, we also need to look into the education and training part of it, because that upskilling of the skills of the workers is very important. Therefore, in Malaysia, we have the My Digital Economy Blueprint, highlighting the need for the current workforce to digitalize and also upskilling their digital skills as well. And finally, I just want to share in terms of the industry skill framework. Currently in Malaysia, we are also focusing on building our capabilities in terms of the pathway on some of the skills that is required, especially in the logistic, involving the freight forwarding and also other main key logistic players as well. I believe that concludes my presentations for today. Now I'll pass back the floor to the MC.
Okay, thank you for your inspiring words. 네, 감사합니다. 말레이시아.
Thank you very much. That was Yuen Tiong from FMFF.
네, 흐름이 되었습니다.
Now it is irreversible. Digitalization is here to stay, and how we can ride on that wave is the challenge for us. Logistics is also going to be a very important part of the digital economy. The silo is breaking down between movement and transaction, and how are we going to respond to this change? Now we'll go a little bit deeper into our discussion.
토론과
We will start our discussion and Q&A session.
I would now like to invite our speakers and panelists for session 2.
네, 오늘 토론에 함께하실 분들을 소개해
Let me introduce you to our panelists. We have Professor Choi Hyung-nim of Donghua University and Director Yeon Cheong of FMFF. And we have Deputy Secretary General Kang Kyung-won of FIATA 2022 and General Manager Kim Seok-yung of Cargo Press.
과장은 최영림 교수님
The moderator for this session is Professor Choi Hyung-nim.
10분까지
Professor Choi, you have the floor and you have until 3:20.
오늘 우리 두 번째 세션 물류 서비스의 디지털화한 아시안
Welcome to business session 2 on digitalization of logistics services and cooperation between ASEAN and ROK logistics companies. As introduced, I am Choi Hyung-nim and I will be moderating this session. And let me briefly introduce you to our panelists.
피아타 20
We have with us Deputy Secretary General Kang Kyung-won of FIATA 2022.
그다음에 카고 프레스의
And we have from Cargo Press General Manager Kim Seok-yung.
저희가 이제 3시 20분까지
We need to conclude by 3:20.
우선 두 분 토론자들께서는
Therefore,
주제 발표 들으신
I would like to ask our panelists to comment on the presentations briefly.
한 7분 정도
I will give you 7 minutes.
또 추가로 또
And then we'll go through another second round of discussions. So first, Deputy Secretary General Kang Kyung-won, your comments, please.
안녕하십니까. 한국
Hello, everyone. I am Kang Kyung-won of KIFA.
공연 잘 경.
Thank you very much for the presentations.
4차 산업 시대에 대비해야 한다는 얘기는 요즘
We always talk about the fact that we need to respond to the fourth industrial revolution era. IoT, big data, AI, metaverse, robots, drones, automation are key terms
어떻게 생태계를 이루고
that we talk about. So we may know what this is all about, but how will that impact our society, our everyday life, and how will we be able to create an ecosystem was a question that I had in mind. But thank you very much for bettering my understanding through the presentations.
물류 서비스의 디지털
The first presentation was on the digitalization of logistics services, and I think that this topic is relevant not only for me as a person, as a logistics person, but also for those that want a better understanding on the future society that the fourth industrial revolution entails.
단순히 물류라는 것이 원자재의 공급,
Logistics is not just about supply of raw materials, movement of goods, storing inventory, and transport of returned goods.
물류의 원활한
Logistics is critical because revenue of a majority of companies are determined by the basic functionalities of logistics.
예상해 볼 수 있게 해줍니다.
So
여러분께서는
we know that the digitalization of inventory or the digitalization of logistics will be key, especially in the era of fourth industrial revolution. I'm sure that you heard that Apple and Amazon and these big companies believe that SCM and their logistics arm is a core part of their business. If we think about digitalization of logistics, we need to look into the actual process and whether this has two sides. For instance, we have our smartphone. We can enjoy all the contents we want on the go. So it provides us with convenience. However, on the flip side, all of the individual applications and the developers request personal information, which leaves us with a sense of discomfort. So it's two-sided. KIFA, the organization that I work for, focuses on promoting the rights of our member companies and the changes in technology and the changes of the times. is something that we need to look into because many do forecast that it may end up as a monopoly or oligopoly of just a handful of companies in this logistics ecosystem. Onozuka Masashi, in his book Logistics 4.0, said that digitalization of logistics will lead to workforce reduction as well as an introduction of new standardization. IoT, big data, robot, automation, and autonomous transport modes will lead to less labor. And a fourth industrial revolution will be about a transition from mass production of just a handful of categories to the so-called long tail. And in the process, logistics will have to switch into bettering their convenience, including the use of containers and pallets. New specifications and standardizations will also emerge in the process, and I think that he has a point there. KDI research fellow Dr. Kim Dong-young said that all of these changes will lead the logistics industry to switch from a labor-intensive to a capital-intensive industry.
한국에서 지금 물류 자동화 일어나는 부분을 보면
In Korea, if we look at logistics automation, Coupang has more than 170 logistics centers nationwide, and they're focusing on adding additional smart logistics centers. And yesterday, CJ Logistics announced that they will make that next leap forward into a company of innovation, and that they will be investing 2.5 trillion won by 2023 to expand their core hubs and fulfillment centers by 8 times. With COVID-19, we're seeing these non-contact online businesses on the rise, and we're seeing the parcel delivery industry also going down the path of monopoly and oligopoly. So that's why we need a logistics ecosystem where these innovative companies and diversified small players can work in harmony. Kifa
이러한 시대 변화
is trying to help out our member companies. The president, as well as all of our directors and members, are not trying to deny the change, but to find a way to create a logistics ecosystem of win-win. So, for instance, we're asking the government for policy funding, such as the Win-Win Fund or mutually beneficial funds, as well as trying to acquire a common logistics platform. And Professor Choi Hyung-nim also talked about the fact that in order to succeed in the fourth industrial revolution era, we need
육체에 이르기까지
uh,
자원
technology and resources and information to be shared amongst the heterogeneous industries and the individual companies, data producers, and consumers. In other words, he talked about the three pillars of openness, sharing, and collaboration, and I cannot agree more. However, on the other hand, in the fourth in Logistics 4.0, all data of the company's procurement, production, sales must be provided.
대부분이라
And this is, of course, the majority of the information that's produced and generated by companies. And in the process of sharing this, I think that it's important to understand that there may be essential costs coming from information security and protection.
저는
A couple of months ago,
연간 120억 원 정도를
I've met with a company that invests an annual 12 billion for 3PL. And out of the 3PL investments, labor cost was about 2 billion won out of the 12 billion. And it was estimated that the cost to build 70% of the applicable automation facilities would be around 15 billion won.
자동화 설
So you can see that the reduction in personnel costs, maintenance in the automation facilities, and considering the space efficiency and so forth, what was needed was to operate the system for at least 10 years to recover the costs. I know that cost optimization will take place soon enough, but it's true that in the current point in time, it's very difficult to make that right decision or that bold decision. So whether it be the third or the fourth industrial revolution, it's very difficult to find that right business entry point. So I would like to ask Professor Choi, as we are transitioning into this Industry 4.0 logistics ecosystem, is there something that we really need to focus on going forward?
연구하고 계신
And I also know that you're studying smart containers, so if it would be great if you can give us a brief introduction on what smart containers are all about. Thank you.
지금 실제 우리 그 물류 해피
In fact, as you work in your association,
산업혁명 시대에 어떻게
your members are probably aware of the upcoming
가는 과정에서
era of the fourth industrial revolution. And as they
부분들에 대해서
go towards the future, what sort of challenges they will be facing are some of the things that you pointed out. Finally, you asked a question, and I'll try to be brief in answering that. In the age of the Industrial Revolution, the fourth Industrial Revolution, how should the member companies respond to this change? I think our speaker from Malaysia also mentioned this, but we need, if we are going to aim for innovation based on new technology, it means that the old way of operating has to change. That means that there will inevitably be some resistance because people by nature don't really want to change. And the most important thing
아까 발표자께서
is therefore,
리더십이 중요하다라는 그런
as
말씀.
mentioned by the speaker, digital leadership. In the individual companies, there are CEOs who lead the organization. And these CEOs
어떻게 왜 해야 되며
must have a clear
방향을
reason why they need to transition to the digital economy. And they need to have a clear sense of direction. The leader has to continue to monitor the ongoing change and make sure that things are going forward as the way he intended. Another important thing is to
투자가 돼야 됩니다. 그래서 그런 부분에
know that investment is necessary. If you want to introduce new technology, you need to invest. So I'd like to take this opportunity to say to the Korean government that there aren't many large logistics companies in Korea. We have a lot of mid-sized companies. That means these logistic companies need some support in bringing in this new technology. That means the barrier has to be lowered. And if the government can take some initiative to teach the new technology to these smaller companies, the companies will be able to benefit from the new technology. They will realize that it just makes everything so much more efficient, and then they will become willing to invest their own money in new technologies.
제가 간단히 말씀드리면
I have one more thing to mention, and that's about smart containers.
관련해서 전 세계
With regard to smart containers, the global trend shows that
실시간으로 모니터링 할 수 있는
they need a system to monitor cold containers real time. And it's mostly the large logistics companies already do that. In addition to this refrigerator containers, we also sometimes need to monitor the regular containers with dry goods. I hope that the Korean Ministry of Ocean and Fisheries realize that this is important. I believe that they're already launched an R&D project on this. So in 2 or 3 years, dry containers as well as refrigerated containers could be transformed into smart containers. Thank you very much for your excellent comments, Mr. Gong. Thank you. Next, Mr. Kim Se-kyun. You've waited a long time from Cargo Plus. Yes, Cargo Plus started to deal with international logistics from 1996, and we analyzed the trends and published it in our magazine. I have been reporting in the international logistics area for about 20 years. I spent 5 years in Africa, 5 years in Hong Kong as an actual forwarder.
와서 보니까 디지털 분류가 완전
And when I returned to Korea, I saw that the digital logistics has become the overriding trend. And I was interested in this subject, and that's why I accepted the invitation to become a discussant at this forum.
티용
Professor Che and Mr. Eun Tiong, it was a great honor for me to listen to your presentations, and it was very helpful, especially the idea mentioned by Professor Che of building a shared logistics hub or center is very attractive because in Southeast Asia, a logistics hub is very much in need, and I think you aptly pointed that out. And Mr. Owen Tiong
말씀 중에
talked about many things, and among the things he mentioned, he frequently mentioned the word cloud and sharing. I think that's going to be a key word. Sharing is necessary for digital logistics. In the physical aspect or logistical engineering aspect, these things are attracting much attention. But in the freight forwarding area that I am dealing with, really needs information on export and import. There's some logistic information to put in when you go through customs, some information that you need to report to the customs service in order to take something out. And these information are sometimes being put in an overlapping manner. I analyzed the reason why this was happening, and that's because clouding and sharing in the information area is not happening. Furthermore, the shipping companies and airliners are proceeding with digitalization in their own way, but it's very much close. In other words, the most important function of forwarder is to make sure to secure enough vessels to provide quotes and do tracing in the transportation. These functional
점점
roles are now being managed in a single dimensional way, despite the fact that we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. And the clouding data is not being shared. That's why it's happening. This is why everything is happening one-dimensionally. In this respect, I'd like to ask Mr. Eun Tiong. In Asia, is this clouding platform actually being done, or are there plans to introduce this? Is it possible to share data with Korea? Are you willing to do that? Is there any movement toward this direction?
지금 뭐 그동안 이제
Yes, thank you very much. Based on your vast experience, Mr. Kim's made some valid points. I think the important thing here is that we're living in the age of fourth industrial revolution, and the basic principle of this revolution is sharing. In this respect, a shared logistic hub is important, and the customs network or logistics network need to share information, but because they're not doing that, it's causing inconvenience to the users. Also, sharing is necessary between the governments. Mr. Tiong actually
부장님께서
touched upon what Mr. Kim raised. Mr. Tiong, could you elaborate on that? In Asia, is there actually
정보들이
cases where customs information is being shared via a platform?
Yes, thank you very much, Professor, and also Mr. Kim from Kabul Press for asking the questions. I think this question is quite similar to one of the attendees who is asking whether is there a possibility to set up a digital standard to deepen the economic integrations. I totally agree with what Mr. Kim has mentioned, and like I've also shared in my presentations right now, there's a lot of companies that have embarked on this digitalization effort, but they have been doing that in a very siloed manner. So when they actually digitalize a lot of all this information in a siloed manner, therefore, a lot of the time you have to do a double entry of a lot of information, and this basically created a lot of duplicate in the informations. I wouldn't go to the ASEAN level first. I would first start off with our Malaysian experience, some of the things that we have seen in Malaysia. In fact, those problems has also happening over here in Malaysia. And previously, we have this online custom integrated systems that actually trying to unify all these informations, but it has unable to do so because many of the logistics players, they are still using their own platform. For us to harness the capabilities of all these digital platform, basically we will need to have that kind of integrations. And the integrations means that you have to have a common standards or probably way of sharing the informations. So all these digital platform has to be having the abilities to share the information within each and other. So first and foremost, I believe it's very important for the internal companies to start the initiate the digital transformation journey first. By doing that, then you are digitizing your information. The data is already available. The next step is basically how can you share the information? So by sharing the information, you have to have all these different kind of platform ability to catch the similar amount of information in a similar manner, or else the information cannot transfer from one platform to the other. This will actually create inefficiency in the digital kind of environment, what I term as a silo kind of digitalization. Silo kind of a digitalization is definitely a no-no, and in fact, it has been happening quite rapidly in Malaysia as well. But I do see that moving forward, there is an opportunity for us to really identify all these challenges, like what I've shared in my presentations, as long as we're willing to bring out all this information out on the surface and discuss it through the dialogue, and not only between ASEAN, but also together with Korea. I do see the possibility for us to really harness the capabilities of these digital economy integrations. All right, so there is definitely an opportunity, and the blueprint and the master plan for the ASEAN 2025, definitely this is a good start for us to move into these directions. So by sharing the information between different regions, and not only between the business logistics companies, but this will only happen if, let's say, there is a government assistance to facilitate between one and another. By setting out common standards and some of the ways that we can connect to one and another, this definitely will make the digital economy possible between the region itself. Yeah, I hope I answered that question, Prof. and also Mr. Kim.
예, thank you very much. 지금 아까 질문하신 것에
Thank you very much. So with regard to your question,
아까 ADAM
as was mentioned, the ADAM 2025 was also one master plan that was mentioned, and it's about having that common platform or foundation going forward.
지금 적어도 우리 국내에서도 어떤 그런
In Korea, we also talk about data sharing. So we also need to have such a common sharing platform in place, first and foremost. And Korea also needs to find a way to share logistics data with ASEAN countries by establishing a platform. So I hope that this seminar serves as an opportunity to initiate such a program. I know that we are very much behind schedule. So I know that you would like to share more, but I believe we'll have to wrap up here.
오늘 발표하시느라고 고생 많으셨습니다.
Thank you, speakers.
국장님. 그리고
Thank you very much, Mr. Eong Tae-yong, and also Deputy Secretary General Kang Kyung-won, General Manager Kim Seok-young. Thank you very much for your contributions. And with that, let me close the panel discussion. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. A big round of applause, please, for our speakers and discussants. And thank you very much, Professor Choi, for also moderating the panel discussion.
아세안 물류 싱크
Business session 2 ends here, and we will move on to the third session. The third session is on response strategies of logistics companies amid COVID-19. We'll take a 10-minute break, and I will see you back at 3:40. Thank you.